Hello and welcome to Paradox, Untold Stories from Athletic Directors. I am Dr. Danielle LaPointe and my co-host is Dr. Dustin Smith. And today we have Zach Clark with us. How are you doing today, Zach?
I'm great and excited to be here with you guys today.
Well, we're excited to have you. Before we jump right in to your stories and your introduction, I just want to thank Ticket Spigot for being our sponsor and the official ticketing partner of the NIAAA. So, hey, Dustin, how are you doing this morning?
Man, I'm doing well. I'm excited about this. I'm excited about visiting with Zach because we have a mutual friend, and Zach will have to question some of his decision making sometimes. He sat through a presentation of mine and Dr. Mark Rarick while we were in, I guess we're in Denver this past year. He sat through a workshop that we did, but Zach is in Iowa, and we've got a mutual friend in Scott Jarvis, who's been a previous guest on this. And so I texted Scott and I said, all right, give me some guys in Iowa that I need to talk to, some guys that we can have on this show that we can have a good time with. And the first person he mentioned was Zach. So I'm excited just to be able to have that connection because I know if he's friends with Scott, he knows tolerance, he knows patience. He's got some virtues that maybe some people need to have. But Zach's got some strong shoe game. And if you've seen anything on Twitter about his customized shoes for his school district, we can talk about that in a little bit. But Zach is also the son of an AD and actually the AD at the school that he's presently at. And he joked before we got on the air about they didn't have to change the name. So he got that job. His dad was the AD 31 years, I believe is what he said. And then he's taken the reins from there. So Clark has been in control there for quite some time. So I'm excited. But Zach, what I always like to ask is, tell us about who you are aside from the AD. What do you like to do for fun? What is the resume? And not tell us about who Zach Clark is.
So I am married to my wonderful wife, Kelly, who like we all know as ADs, our spouses really are the only reason anything gets done ever. And I've got my 6-year-old son, Paul. He's going to be in first grade, who is a mini me. We kind of have the same interests. You know, we like to we're big 49ers fans. We're big Iowa State Cyclones fans. We just go wherever we can go to a sporting event or go play golf together, or just go mess around together. We will do it. I have a 5-month-old Allison. So our house has kind of had a transition here the last 6 months, getting back into that after not, transitioning kind of out of that newborn phase. And so then 2 dogs, Veda, who's a 9-year-old German Shorthair Pointer, and Kittle, who is I can't think how old she is now. She's like an 8-month-old golden retriever. So she's nuts.
Lots of energy.
We had I had a 10-year-old golden retriever that I had before I even met my wife, and I had to put her to sleep in December, and I was going to wait to get another dog until the summer, like right now, after the baby had arrived. And my impulse control didn't hold on very long, and I ended up with a new puppy in January. So so what I do outside of here, I love to spend time with them, and I love to spend time with those 2 dogs, going for walks or whatever. I don't hunt them, but my dad takes them out to hunt. And then my mom and dad live, we mentioned my dad a little bit. My mom, I need to mention her too. She's a special education and reading teacher here at school with me. My, dad's been retired for 6 years, but my mom turned 70 in March and will not walk out the door. She's going to start her 43rd year of teaching at Central Decatur this fall. So she's unreal. She's incredible. We call her the assistant AD, and it's really the only reason some things get done throughout my dad's tenure and my tenure here so far. So they live 8 blocks away. So it's we just all spend a lot of time together, kind of doing fun stuff together, and then just hanging out with some close friends of mine, with their kids. Our kids are friends, so running around and just having fun as much as possible when I can escape this place, I guess, from my hobbies. So
let me ask a couple questions. How in the corn did you become a 49ers fan in Iowa?
I think I go back to, I was born in 1982. So there when I was, 5, 6, 7, they were winning a lot of games with Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. And I think just being a little punk, both my mom and dad are from upstate New York. And so my dad's a lifelong Giants fan. And I think,
Oh, you
and
were
I
doing
think at the,
so well until you said that.
yeah. So I
How
think
are
at the
you
time,
from upstate New York and not a Buffalo
I
fan?
I I don't understand it either because he grew up right outside of Rochester, and
Yeah.
so I I think I became a 49ers fan just to spite his Giants fandom and just have a little bit of a rivalry in the household, and then it's just always been there. So and
So,
then
is your dog named after a 49ers player?
yes, my son. I told my son he could name the dog, the new puppy, because I named Taylor after actually James Taylor, singer. But I told Paul he could name the new puppy, and he didn't hesitate. He said, "I want to name her after George Kittle." So yes, that's where Kittle came from.
I can appreciate that. My daughter is named after the Chicago Cubs stadium. Um,
Okay,
so I can appreciate naming somebody after a sports team of some sort, whether that's a player. We have a dog. It's also named Brizzo. Because I'm a Cubs fan, when Bryant and Rizzo were playing together before they shipped them off and the Cubs became terrible again. So I can appreciate that. We've got that in common to be able to name animals after our favorite sports teams.
yeah, that's my parents. My parents always had golden retrievers, and all theirs were named after different people from their early days. Like even though they were dogs I had as a kid, they I didn't know some of the people because they were from old players that my mom and dad liked. So
So they didn't name you like Dwight Clark or anything like that after the catch in the end zone because they weren't
no,
49ers teams.
yeah, no, yeah, I don't. I think Zach was a family name, and I think what my mom told me when I was a kid was my dad got to name the two kids, my sister and I, and my mom got to name the dogs. That was the deal. That was the deal they had going through. So,
So
which makes total sense.
right. In some world it makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
So my question to you is this. Let's paint on a map where you're at Central Decatur. We've talked about it kind of off air, but for those that are listening may not understand where Central Decatur High School is. Would you paint that on a map for us?
So yeah, so we're a small rural community, an hour straight south of Des Moines. Right off, so 5 minutes off Interstate 35. So if you're going from Des Moines to Kansas City on Interstate 35, exit 12, and you get off and you head 5 miles east, and you're in Leon. We're about hour straight south of Des Moines, 2 hours away from Kansas City when you go by interstate. So in a pretty good place to go. I know we're kind of off the beaten path for everyday activities, but when we need to go do something or see something, it's easy to get to one of those two places to do it.
So can you get to Fargo, North Dakota from your location on I-35?
Don't bite into this.
No, I got to ask this question just because we had an episode of a guy going from Oklahoma
I
to
know where you're
Fargo
going with it.
and just wondering if he could have gone through Iowa instead of Omaha.
I don't think so because I don't all I know is if I stay on I-35, I'm going to run into Minneapolis, and then I don't know where I'm going to. And that's as far north as I've gotten.
Okay.
You
So
don't
that
want to be
just
part
shows
of that
that
story. Zach, you don't want to be part of that story. So good job on that one.
so
Oh
in,
man.
in Iowa, we kind of joked around before. Being a big sports fan, I am. The movie Field of Dreams was based out of Iowa and
Yeah.
talking about Iowa. And so I asked Zach kind of just in joking, if we build it, will they come? And that's a reference to Field of Dreams. I know that predates you, Danielle, but that's a
No,
great.
I know what you were saying and what the core, and I caught all of it.
Yeah, we were actually just there. We went to the Wisconsin Dells with our close family friends. Our two families took our kids up and went to the Dells, and on the way home stopped at the Field of Dreams. And I'd been there before, but the kids and my son's been there before too. But the kids got to run around and play catch. My actual my good friend that was on this trip with us last year, he farms around here, and he won two free tickets to the game through the Corn Growers Association to last year's game. So him and son got to go to that, and it just sounded incredible.
That's a bucket list item for me. I want to go up there just to see that. I'd love to see a game there. I think what they did last year was really cool. Why in the world they had the Cubs and Reds this year, I have no idea. But it, that's a
I,
bucket list for me.
I believe you can stay in the house. You can rent the house for like a night.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, next to the house from the movie. I think you can rent it and stay in it overnight.
I'm in on that.
So yeah,
I think that's pretty cool. But okay, we can quit talking about sports references and all this stuff that I'm all giddy about. What I'm excited about is one, your eagerness to respond to the text that Scott sent out to say, "Hey, would you want to be on this podcast?" And you had a Seinfeld reference on there that you were totally down. Put me down. I'm down with that. So I'm excited to listen to some stories, to have some conversations, just have a little fun. So, is there something you want to start off with? I know you had to seek some counsel to make sure you remembered all these weird times that you went through. But is there a story or two or three that stick out to you?
yeah. Well, so like just kind of building off what I've talked about this morning with so our complex. So we built this. So it was built by. So we've got this brand new. Well, it's not brand new anymore, I guess, but it was brand new in 2016 was when we opened it. Turf field, all weather track. You know, we never had even an all weather track in our district. And then, of course, never had a turf field and renovated everything. Really, the only thing that stayed was the press box, and the old concession stand became restrooms. Um, so we're getting ready for the very first game we were going to have on it was a JV football game. I think we got everything ready in a JV football game on a Monday night in late August. And, you know, I just, first year as the AD, so I wanted to make sure I had everything done and I wasn't rushing. So I think like I had been out there the week before. I was like, I'm going to get these goalpost covers on now and get that taken care of. So not being very smart about how I was putting the goalpost pad on, instead of just like putting it on my chest and opening it up and pushing it against the goalpost, I went to the backside and I pulled it open and was pulling it towards me. And when I did that, it popped my wedding ring off. And I've never been a ring person, never worn a ring, never bought a class ring, just didn't like any of that. But all of a sudden I got married, and at one point I was like, "Mom, I'm never going to get married and have to worry about it." And then Kelly, bless her heart, allows me to marry her, and so this ring pops off, and it could, of course, go anywhere on this turf, right? It hits the goalpost, and instead of bouncing anywhere it could have bounced, it slides straight down the goalpost into the sleeve that's buried in the ground.
Oh
So, of
no.
course, like colorful language, like 30 seconds of colorful language later, I stop and I'm like, okay, I can think this through. And you can just pull the, you know, like on the turf, they just have the little things to open up to get into where that's at. So I'm like, maybe I can just get down in there. And well, then that sleeve only sits about that goalpost. There's only about 2 inches, not even two, sometimes an inch to two clearance from that sleeve to the goalpost to really be able to get in there. And it's probably 5 feet, 4 to 5 feet down, and it's full of water and you know, the rubber infill stuff. So I couldn't see anything. So I called what was neat about our complex, on a side note, is the architect that designed the whole thing was a Central Decatur graduate. The general contractor was actually his brother, Central Decatur graduate. So we had all these local people that we'd all grown, you know, our superintendent's a Central Decatur graduate. A lot of the people that were head coaches and helped plan it, Central Decatur graduates. So we all had such an interest in doing this for the kids that were coming of something that we didn't have. So I called them, as many of them as I could right away. And the architect's like, why, maybe we can put a magnet on the end of a piece of steel and get down in there. So we tried that, no luck. We tried to hook like a camera to my phone, like a snake camera, and put it down in there, no luck. So I know my dad spent time when school started. My dad just spent random times up there trying to problem solve something to get the ring back, and just never, like, it's still in there. So I guess a piece of it was in the field. I've never gotten it back. I just
Oh,
I got online and
no.
bought one of those, like, I don't know if I say it right, like Kalo or Qualo rings. They're just
Yeah,
those
the
little
silicone
silicone.
one. I
Yeah.
have that too.
So I just bought that because I remember going home and I was like, honey, I don't want you to be mad at me, but that wedding ring is in the bottom of the goalpost at the football field. And she's humor, like she gets it enough. She just kind of laughed at me. It was like, well, that was pretty dumb. So, so that was kind of my first, that was the first week we were on that turf. And unless I have to come fix the goalpost one day and take it out, my ring's going to sit in there. So it's going to be constantly in
But
there, I suppose.
I I was going to ask you about that conversation when you got home. Because I think about kids and coming into class and be like, "Hey, the dog ate my homework." We had all these scenarios come up, but go
Yeah.
home and say, "Hey, dear, I, I don't have my ring, and here's the story." And my wife would look at me like, "Uh huh, really?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would have
I,
tried to sell it in many ways as I could.
I think I rolled in and I think I thought about like, how was I going to say this? And I'm like, well, I'll just tell her how dumb I was because then she'll be like, oh, that makes total sense. So I think I was like, well, I was kind of stupid in the way I should have pushed them on and not pulled them on from the back. And then this happened. And I think like her line to me through our time has been when I do stuff like that, when she looks at me and says, how do you even function sometimes? And I think that was the response. She'll
Well, in your
she'll say that to me
defense,
like, "How do you put together these big events and plan all this stuff, and then you have something like that happen to you?" So,
in your defense, I've had ring stories too. When I first got engaged, I was thinner. Say nothing, Dustin. And my ring went into a 5 gallon bucket of paint, like that wasn't mixed yet. So it was just like the thick white paint, and I was like my heart sank, and I thought I would didn't know how I was even going to get that thing out, and that is nowhere's near the extreme depths that your ring went, and I can't even imagine how you felt, especially after time went by and it wasn't coming back.
yeah, and so like, so when I was talking to people about the story, like my wife, of course, brought up that story, and I was on a little bit of a hot streak there that first month we had the field because then we had the very first home football game, and so everyone's going to come that first night because they want to see the new field, and it was just gorgeous. It was like a 70-degree night in the first Friday in September. Um, Everybody's there. We're playing a school from 20 minutes away, so they all want to see it too. So they're down here, and it's just the stands are packed. It couldn't have been a more perfect night. We won big, so it was great. So then we've got a home game the very next week too. We're playing now instead of our rival to the north, we're playing our rival to the west. Um, and now they're in awe of this facility, and they kind of, they have always been the ones with the best probably facilities around the area. Now we've got this, and they're in awe of it. But that night there was a chance of storms. So going back to the first night, what I had learned, we got new lights, Musco lighting, that was awesome, and you can turn them on and off from your phone. And I thought, oh, this is cool. So
No, no.
the very first game we had it, I was like, oh, I'm turning this off from my phone. But at that time, like in their system, they were making you set an off time. So I would just set it for 11:45 or something, and not
Mhm.
we're not going to be here at 11:45. So did the same thing the next week. Uh, Turned on the lights at like 6 o'clock on my phone, set them for 11:45, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of the second quarter, storm rolls in. So it's and so we get, and it's a lightning, pouring rain storm, and so both teams are in their locker rooms. Officials are back inside. People are um, in our high school commons, our elementary commons, kind of waiting it out. And it had been a couple hours. And the other schools' coaches were like, "Let's come back tomorrow and play." And our coach was like, "We can't do it tomorrow. Let's come back Sunday and play." And they're like, "Well, we can't do it Sunday." So we're like, "Well, we're going to hang on for a little bit while longer." I think we were up by like 3 touchdowns at the time. So if we didn't get it played, I guess whatever. Um, And then the official looked at me and said, Zach, we're not staying any longer. Like this 30 minutes, if this 30 minutes doesn't get to zero and we go, if we have to restart it, we're done. And I was like, okay, so that's fine. So we somehow storm cleared up. We go back out. We play the rest of the 4 minutes of the second quarter. We had some halftime stuff planned, but by then, we had some academic recognition stuff. Everyone had gone home because it's like 10:30. So
The more you're talking and setting this up, like my anxiety is raising because I feel like I know.
We have a 10-minute, we're like, let's have a fast as halftime as we can. So they said, well, we got to put 10 minutes up. We just have to. So we put 10 minutes up. Neither team leaves the field. Like they just go sit in the end zone like it's a junior high game. And so we go, we keep playing. We get into the fourth quarter. I bet there's 4 minutes left in the game. We score. So we're up by, it was still about 3 touchdowns. We kick off. We tackle the kid. And then the entire place goes black, just pitch black. And I had totally forgot in this whole mess that I had set that timer. So I bet they heard me say something that I probably shouldn't have said on public from 10 miles away because I was standing on the sideline. It happened. Everybody's looking around, and then I realized what happened. So I went running into where the switches for the lights, and it was on it was like on, off, or
Auto.
Auto, yeah. So I just switched it as fast as I could to auto or to on. And but still, even as good as those LED lights are, it's going to take 15 to 20 minutes to get back up. So then now it's midnight and we're waiting again. And the other team's head coach, bless his heart, was the longtime AD at Mount Air, which is west of us. So I've known him my whole life, of course, through my dad. And he was like their boys basketball coach when I played in high school. So we've had a long relationship. So he, bless his heart, he just looked at me and started, even, we were winning and he had the peace of mind just to not jump all over me like he could have. He kind of laughed at me and made a joke at my expense. And 15, 20 minutes later, they came back on. We played the last 3 minutes of the game. I think I left after picking everything up that night at between 1:30 and 2. And I tell you what, from that day forward, whether it's a track meet, whether it's a football game, that thing gets turned on with my keys. No more phone turning on the lights just in case. I'll turn them on, if they needed them on for a practice or something. But when it's a competition, I go in there with my key and I turn that thing to on. There is no timer messing up my life.
Now, what I'm amazed by, Zach, is just the probability of some of this stuff that you've encountered. Like the ring sliding down, not bouncing off like it did. And then the fact that the lights went out after the play was made. The tackle was made, then the lights go out. So yeah. I think about what if the lights would have gone out while the kid was running?
That would. Yeah.
I mean, you've got impeccable timing, and the probability, you're not a statistic that everybody would follow.
Yeah, I thought about that often. What if it would have been right in the middle of the next play, some kids were running the line of scrimmage and thank God it was then when everybody was standing so no one got hurt.
Loud.
By all of a sudden not knowing what they were running into.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm surprised though that you guys actually waited for the lights to turn back on if you had 3 or 4 minutes left of the game. I'm surprised the officials, everybody was like, that's it. We're done. Goodbye.
Yeah, that's what, that kind of surprised me too. I suppose we'd been there so long anyway, we might as well just put the thing down.
Yeah, finish it.
Yeah, it was, thank God it was Mount Air, that it was a 25-minute drive home and not some school that we might have to play in district play that's an hour and a half. So, yeah, that was my first month as the AD. So I'm going home and, I'm getting home at 2:00 that morning and my son is a month and a half at that time. So then I'm helping feed him and just what have I gotten myself into? And I knew that from so that football field's been great for us, but it's also my dad's craziest AD stories from that is back in the fall of 2010. We had a JV game one night, and so the field before it was redone, like those old cinder tracks, like people would just drive onto the cinder track to watch the game, right? And it had a big hillside on both the one on the south side. So Dad was we had a gator and it didn't have a top on it. And I was the JV football coach at the time, so we coached the game. It was homecoming week, so I was actually down a ways in our student parking lot talking to a police officer because he's like, "Hey, I'm just going to start cruising through here to make sure nothing's going on tonight." I'm like, "Hey, that's great." And then I saw up by the field, I just saw the lights flicker on the gator, but I just assumed it was from my dad um, hitting a bump up there or something, right? And I didn't think anything of it. I walked around back. I got in my truck and drove out, which it wouldn't have taken me right by where he would have been. And my mom earlier that night had been like, "Hey, I made some lasagna. Come over for supper after the game. We'll just eat together." I said, "All right." So I got home and I let my dog was there. I didn't have the dog. I let their dog out. And I'm like, man, it's taking them a long time to get home. What's going on? Mom calls and says, "Oh my God, your dad rolled the gator on top of himself." So he was going over to turn off the lights and it was just wet and somehow turned too quick and he rolls the gator on top of himself. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I go running back out the door thinking he's got the gator laying on top of him and she can't get it off him. No, here he is walking into our house right as I pull the door open. He's bleeding from his face. I'm like, "Dad, what happened?" And so he's got gas and fluids all over him. He's like, "I don't know, but I got to get in the shower." Like, so it rolled on him and he was luckily able to get himself like in a ball and was able to like slide and scoot it and get out from under it before, and so he was able to then call my mom and be like, "Hey, I'm here." And because she was waiting on the back of the school for him when we parked the gator. So she had no idea either. So all that happens. He showered, whatever. We eat and he goes to bed. And, I would wake up for, a ding of my phone in the middle of the night. I lived on a little property outside of town. And for some reason I didn't that night. I woke up and I had 10 missed calls from my mom. And I was like, oh my God, something serious is going on. So I called her back. They were at the emergency room with my dad. He was having a heart attack, basically. They put him in an ambulance, drove him to Des Moines, and he had emergency quadruple bypass surgery that next morning at like 6:30 in the morning. So it was wild because, of course, in him, mom calls me and I'm like, oh my God, do I need to come to Des Moines? She's like, no, just take care of the dog and stay home. Dad said it's just going to be a couple stents. Like they drove him in an ambulance, but they're like, well, we'll probably have to do a couple stents. So Dad's like, we got home volleyball tonight. Just take care of the volleyball and you can come see me tomorrow after the stents or after I'm kind of recovered from surgery. And I was like, okay, I was just going to do what he said. But at that time, you can't sleep. So I was a special ed teacher at the time. So 4:00 in the morning, I just brought the dog to school with me and we did special ed paperwork together. She sat here and my mom calls at 6 and says, it's way more serious than that. You need to get to Des Moines right now. Well, when they did the dye test, the widowmaker artery was 95% blocked. So they said, we're going to do quadruple bypass. And then so they did it. He came out of it. He was out of school for like 2 months and then been back. And then, he's been retired for 6 years. But we look back on the craziness of that one, the timing of that one is, what we think, the stress of and the anxiety of being pinned under a gator and the exertion to get out from under it probably kickstarted some things for him. But if it doesn't, he never knows that is like that. Does he just drop over dead in the hallway or at an event or at home because he never knows it's that blocked? So did that gator rolling on top of him at that football game that night save his life in the next 6 months to a year? Probably did.
But
wow, that's intense.
yeah,
I need a minute.
I'm not making jokes about this. I just want to ask a couple questions. One, you noticed the flicker of the lights.
Yeah.
So you noticed when that event happened. But you made a comment in there that he said he's got a shower. So he showered, whatever, and then you ate. Like it was no big deal. No big deal that the gator rolled on top of him, rolled over on him.
Yeah, got the blood off, got his stinky clothes off, and took a shower and ate. And then when we went back upstairs later that night, he's like, and his dad died at 48 of a heart attack. So and it's not like he hadn't been told by his doctors and stuff like that. So, and he had done some things to change, over the last probably 5 years before that, lost probably 30 pounds. And so that second that, hey, this is tight, and I don't think this is from the trauma of that accident. Like this won't stop being tight. And luckily, went out there, and the doctor working in the ER had known him for a long time and knew kind of that, and was like, I don't like these numbers. You're going to Des Moines.
I mean, think about, and the resilience of an AD. I mean, he was an AD at the time this happened, and just the resilience to, hey, he's up there getting ready to have quadruple bypass surgery, and he's telling you, hey, you stay and take care of the volleyball game that we got tonight.
Yeah, and so
and worked on the mind.
And even though, so he's a crazy person, and we like to give him a really hard time all the time. The last thing, my mom just laughs. He was also, so we're not full-time AD at the school, so he was the halftime AD, halftime biology teacher. So for my trauma growing up, I had my mom for middle school health class, and I had my dad for high school biology. So, those conversations in those classrooms that you're having to watch your friends listen to them from your parents, was a whole nother part. But so what's he say? The last thing he says, mom says, as they wheel him away, she hears him say to the nurse, can we make sure, like, if you're going to videotape this, can I get a copy for my class, please?
That's awesome.
So they weren't doing that, but they did have like the animation on a CD of what the dye test looked like. So he made sure he came home with that. And that was like the first thing that went on the big screen to his anatomy and physiology class when he got back to school.
I mean, you think about just just his wherewithal to think about that in that process. Say, hey, I could use this as a teaching moment for my kids. I can use this as a teaching moment for class. Not worried about the severity of what the surgery was. He was just going in there saying, hey, I'm gonna use this as a teaching moment.
Yeah, and and I tell stories about him, and my mom's the exact same way. She was diagnosed with breast cancer right before, it was right before COVID, but it was really early. So she went through radiation right when COVID started. Like, she was going through radiation from March to August when COVID started. So, like, we were telling her, like, maybe don't go back to school because we don't know a lot about this, and your immune system is not working like everybody else's right now because of the radiation and the chemo. She would go like on a Thursday. She had the port in. She would go on a Thursday. They'd hook up the pump, and she'd come back on Saturday to remove it. And she went through that that was like every other week for 6 months. And we're like, maybe don't. No, she went to school the first day of school, and then the next day she went to she went back to class. But right before that started, maybe I'm confused. Maybe the breast cancer, they found that earlier. What this was, I got them together. She went in for just a regular checkup, a colonoscopy, and they're like, hey, we found something. We need to do surgery like right now today. And we had a home basketball game that night. And so she's like, hey, they've got to do this surgery, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, and they're going to do it at our local hospital, which is great in this little community. And I'm like, oh, this is my mom. Like, do I just skip the game and come sit out there at the hospital with you? And like, the conversation lasted 10 seconds about, I'm going to do this surgery. And the next 2 minutes was, who are you going to get to do the book for the basketball games tonight? I'm like, you're nuts. Like, well, I think if I can get them to let me go after surgery, I can come do them. I'm like, we'll find somebody else. So she just had this surgery because of what they found. And then, but she's doing well too. She goes to her checkups, but she does our book for volleyball. She does our book for basketball. She's coached middle school volleyball. She's coached middle school track. She's coached middle school and high school softball. So she's just as, like, it's funny if you ask those, talk to ADs in Iowa, when one of her favorite times of the year is the state AD convention. She just loves going over there and seeing everybody. And so I'm just a product of those two, and we care about this school and community. And so that's kind of been so a lot of my stories start from them, their craziness, and I kind of do those similar things. So
Your love for athletics runs deep, like
yeah,
very deep.
Well, I think because there's been a Clark in the AD chair for 37
Hmm.
years now, or 38 years, however your math wants to figure it, you think about your commitment to that place, but you're really committed and your ring is there. What you
Yeah.
vowed your life to is there on that field in that complex.
You He married the school. That's the
Right.
way I
yeah,
look at it.
yeah.
Like people
I,
say they're married to their job, but Zach really is.
and kids put it in great perspective for you. Um, One day, a couple of years ago, my son said, "Hey, when are we going to go to your other house?" And I said, "Oh, this is my only house." He goes, "No, the school is your other house. You live there too."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh." So, but he goes, he's in the gator with me. That's just what it is. He's on my shoulders, walking around on the field, whatever.
Do
So,
you drive the Gator differently now? Are you a little more careful when you're whipping that thing around now?
well, it's a newer one, so at least it's got a top.
Okay.
And we don't have quite the hillside that we have to deal with anymore.
Yeah, new complex now. That was back in
Yeah,
10.
yeah. So yeah, and then the other crazy story I had for you guys was a football game again. Um, it was homecoming. The fall we came back from COVID. It was homecoming, and we hadn't had we weren't restricting attendance. Um, we somebody joked that Decatur County was the state champion of COVID in Iowa because we were the last county to have a case. So we just still had people showing up for everything. We weren't restricting attendance, especially to outside events. And so we got all these people there that night. And then I get some little kid coming to me and said, "Hey, there's a mess in the bathroom." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I go in the bathroom, and someone had in the men's bathroom had well, there's two stalls. In one stall, someone had just pooped on the back of the toilet, and on the other stall, someone had just pooped on behind the toilet on the floor. So I was like, "Oh my God, we've got to close this up and shut this down right now." So I happened to walk out of the bathroom and I walk right into my superintendent. He goes, "Do you need any help with anything?" I said, "I need you to stand right here and not let anybody else go in here." Well, I call the the custodian that was inside at the time. I said, "Hey, can you grab this? This is what we got. Can you grab some stuff and come out?" He said, "Yep, sure can." I get out. I haven't been off the phone with him for 30 seconds. We've got a big parking lot. And what I would try to do was walk it once a quarter just to make sure kids hadn't snuck out there or whatever. And if the person kind of down by the entry was like, called me 30 seconds after I made the call to the custodian and said, "Hey, you've got a group of about 25 to 30 kids in the parking lot." And I thought, well, that's not going to be any good. So I just told the superintendent, I said, "Hey, can you just help with this and I'll be back?" And he said, "Yeah, that's fine, go." So I go down to the parking lot and I'm walking and I'm trying to get an eye on these kids. And I hear somebody say, "Oh, blank, there's Zach." And then it was like cockroaches when the lights came on. They saw me and they scattered. Everybody scattered except for this one young man who was from the school we were playing. And I looked at him and he kind of caught my eye right away because he had on no shoes, he had on no shirt, he was just in gym shorts, and he wasn't walking in a straight line. So I watched him walk in front of me, and he bounced off cars as he walked in front of me, stopped about 4 feet from me, and just started peeing in the parking lot. So I was like, "Oh no." So I he comes back and I follow him back to his car, the car he's at, and everybody by now is scattered. And I recognize some people from what they were wearing. Um, One guy was the other two kids of his friends were in overalls with no shirts on, so they were kind of easy to pick out of the crowd. So this kid gets back in the back seat of this car, and I said, "Hey, what's your name?" And he tells me, and I said, have you been drinking tonight, bud?" And he said, Yeah, a little. And I'm almost stepping in his puke outside the car door. And I said, I'm going to need you to step back out of the car with me, and I'm going to call. And I just right before I got down there, I said, we got a whole big crowd. Where are you at? To the local law enforcement agent. And he's like, I'll get back up there. He had just been there and had to leave to go do something. So in the process of it coming back up, the kid looks at me and says, I said something like, I'm going to need you to get back up. Oh, sorry, my watch. He looks at me and just smiles at me and rolls up the window and goes back to sleep in the back of the car. Like that was going to make it all go away. So police officer rolls up and says, is like, this kid's hammered. And I said, yeah. So he starts dealing with him. And I said, I'm going to go try to find the other couple that I recognized that are at least in this car. And so they were easy to pick out. Bless those kids' hearts, they had just made a mistake and they were pretty respectful. I said, hey, I found the one. I said, you need to come with me. So he said, okay. And I called the other school's administrator and I said, if you're here, I need this kid, the kid that looks like this. He said, I see him in our student section. I'll get him down there. So they came down and they were those kids were pretty respectful and honest. And it was probably the thing that saved them that night with law enforcement. And, but he said, what I'm going to do is you have to wait I'm not going to let you leave until a parent comes to pick you up. Well, those kids weren't, they were just fans of the football game. So their parents weren't there. So all their parents got a call about 9:00 that said, we need you to come get your son. And we're, 50 minutes away. So we sat there. By the time the last one got there, it was probably 11:00. And none of those parents were very happy. Those rides home, the ride homes for those young men were not enjoyable. I can promise you that. But so that was like my first kind of issue with that on that kind of scale of the game, I think.
But you're dealing with all of this and you've left your superintendent with the poo bathroom.
Right. So if you go, what also is kind of funny about that story. So this all happened, right? And I didn't stay down there the entire time because I found the second kid pretty quickly and brought him down to the law enforcement officer. And I said, hey, there are some of our kids down here. I'm going to the student section to find them. And so I was going, and like the principal's calling me, but he was in charge of running our clock and he did a really good job of it. So I was like, you just keep running the clock. And I walked by, as I'm going by the bathroom to get to our student section, our superintendent comes out and he's got gloves on up to his elbows. So he's been in the bathroom with the custodian cleaning up the mess. And all I could do was look at him and laugh and say, hey, thanks, I appreciate you.
Oh, no.
And I said, I'm also going to need you to get cleaned up to come help me with some other stuff. So, but yeah, so we got it all sorted out and it kind of took care of itself. But it was probably it was crazy. And it was the first one of that I kind of dealt with in that avenue, I guess, of something like that happening in an event. So we made sure we had a little bit more of a intentional conversations with our kids about not going to the parking lot. Like if we caught you there after the game started, you're gone and there's no discussion. So
I'm just glad that the two stories weren't related because in the beginning, I was concerned that the two stories were gonna like Poop Man was in the parking lot now. I didn't know if there was gonna be a correlation there, and I'm really glad there wasn't for you.
Yeah.
Like it could have.
When I was 18, I worked for our local county conservation officer. So one of the jobs was cleaning the bathrooms at the parks, and you have those kind of pit toilets and stuff, and so you never knew what you're going to find. But we had somebody that we referred to as the Mad, not Hatter,
right?
Had something else that we had to clean up after once in a while because of that.
And I think about I was going to go before you went to a level I wasn't ready for. I was going to say, how in the world are they that accurate that they can get it behind the toilet?
Yeah, I don't know.
With a toilet right there, that just makes no sense to me.
Or inaccurate. I think the inaccurate is more of the issue.
That's got to be intentional. That's not something you miss the toilet on.
Right. Like, the first two things, I was like, how, why, what? Like, And at that moment, you're trying to figure out how to solve it, and then the next thing is like, I got to negotiate a pay raise or something.
Right.
And then, well, luckily, the superintendent's great, and he came. Um, he was right there, and he jumped right in, and besides being our superintendent, grew up on a farm locally and still farms the ground and takes care of the livestock. So that it probably was nothing for him to get in there and go to work. So, but it was funny to come. It was a moment of comedy to come back from that whole situation and see him with these big old gloves on walking out of the bathroom. So
what I have learned today, Zach, is I'm not going to a football game with you at all, ever.
oh yeah, yeah.
Nope, I agree. Hmm.
I come home and my wife's just like, why does this stuff happen to you? Like, you just have a normal night. I don't know.
You know what? Now it all makes sense about her reaction about the wedding ring.
Yeah.
You're like,
And
oh yeah.
we're supposed to have this scrimmage tonight. I'm looking at the radar and it looks like it could be tricky. Like, I'm just like, do we even have the scrimmage when, what my pattern of luck is on these things?
I'm glad you told the stories in the order you did, because it set up all of this as you got to, so then we could get that response. Every one of these stories, really.
Right. Right.
I am hopeful that tonight goes without problem for you. I'm hopeful that you got the board all figured out. That gets taken care of, but you don't have any mystery poopers. You don't have any mystery drunk people. It's just a matter of just a game and kids playing tonight. That's my hope for you tonight, Zach.
That's what I hope too. We get to have our recognitions and have kids play and get to do some fun stuff and meet the teams. But I just never know.
Well, I'm going to use your wife's line when I see you: is why does this stuff happen to you? How do you function at some of these things?
Function was and it's it still gets said, like, with Allie, our newborn, I'll screw I screw something up like every day. Don't mess up the kids today, and I do something like, I'll knock the bottle over, or do something when I'm changing a diaper, or like whatever I do, and she just looks at me and she shakes her head. And she's like, how do you function? Because you do all these big scale things, and then you just. So yeah, it's more often than not.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you letting us laugh at your expense today.
It's okay.
Jumping on here and your excitement just to be part of this. I've enjoyed it. You may not have enjoyed reliving those stories, but they've been exciting to me.
We definitely did.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's funny. I think about that. That's 6 years. My poor mother and father, after 40 years, 40 years in education, they've got some too. We just sit back and laugh, and that's what's nice about it is, I've had people are born with a silver spoon, and I've had a kind of a silver spoon athletic director wise, because I don't have to worry about calling someone. What's great in Iowa, you can call anybody for advice, but like I've got advice right next to me whenever. Sometimes he just shows up in my office, which is great. He just kind of, he's running around. So, and then gets mad at me when I threw something away that he had in here in this office, and then he can't find it because I threw it away.
You gotta say, hey, my first name's on the door now.
Yeah, but he's great. He's still, like, on track meet days. I take care of a lot of the technology, and he takes care of a lot of the kind of physical setup of stuff. So just to help out, because I was in the classroom, I had a special ed class or something to do, but now I'm going to be the special education coordinator along with the activities director. So now my day I'm not in the classroom anymore. So that will help flexibility wise.
Well, I know you got a lot going, especially with the scrimmage tonight. So I want to say thanks for jumping on here. Thanks for.
This is a blast.
I mean, I've enjoyed having the conversation, and I appreciate you attending the session that Mark and I taught back in Denver. Yeah. And you still agreed to be on this. So your fortitude is pretty good. Yeah.
So this is great. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you. I enjoyed. Thank you for letting us, kind of giggle along with you at your expense, and it's been awesome. So thank you to Zach, and also thank you to Take It Spigot, who makes all of our episodes possible.
All right, thank you.